This guy goes and kills one of the Starfleet crew because he thinks it'll make him look more beautiful for her. It's twisted. I've played guys who killed their own kids and abused their own kids in horrible ways. I can't play that, but I can play a guy who is so in love that he's willing to do anything to please her. But everything has to do with what do they want? And this guy is in love, wants to be noticed, wants to love her, wants her to love him. And if that's what you play, that's all you play. Hi, everybody. Brian Markinson here. You may remember me from Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and The Next Generation. I played various characters, including Sulan in Faces. This is Trek Untold.
Welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I am your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. In case you couldn't tell, I love speaking with character actors on this show, and really it's hard not to notice by now if you've looked at this list that I've got for all my past episodes. They're the backbone of Hollywood, and their stories, I think, are some of the most fascinating, entertaining, and informative. And personally, I think that some of the best moments I've had on this podcast were in episodes with performers like this. And today's guest is one, I've got to tell you guys, is who I've been looking forward to chatting with for a very long time. Brian Markinson appeared in 4 episodes of different Star Trek shows, doing double duty in one of them to play a total of 5 characters. Brian first appeared in Season 7 of The Next Generation as Vorin in the episode Homeworld, a character with a very tragic outcome. He followed that up in the first season of Star Trek Voyager, playing Lieutenant Pete Durst. And you would have seen that lieutenant in the episodes Cathexis or Cathexis, I don't quite know how to say that, let's go with Cathexis, and Faces. And speaking of, in that latter episode, he also played the gruesome Sulan, aka one of the most disgusting looking characters in Star Trek history, and definitely one of their most disturbing episodes ever. Brian's final appearance to date in the franchise came in the 5th season of Deep Space Nine, where he played the unusual scientist Elias Giger from the episode In the Cards. In addition to his diverse roles in Star Trek, you may also recognize Brian from his roles in Mad Men, Tribal, The Magicians, Arctic Air, Supernatural, The Killing, X-Files, Stargate SG-1, and a whole lot more in a career that spanned multiple decades. Brian is incredibly enthusiastic and energetic about what he does, and he's got some really, really wonderful stories I know you've never heard before. So let's meet today one of my favorite character actors from Trek and beyond, and one who, well, I certainly nerded out over a little bit here, maybe kind of sort of. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to know the life and the work of Brian Markinson. But before we start our chat with this week's guest, I want to remind you to please follow Trek Untold on social media, including Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find this show on all of those platforms simply by searching for Trek Untold. Make sure you subscribe to this show, whether that's on the audio platform of your choosing or on YouTube, where the video version of this show lives. And speaking of, make sure to check out our YouTube channel more frequently for episodes of our new mini show, Tales from Trek Untold, as well as other sci-fi goodies. And of course, don't forget to leave ratings, reviews, comments, and whatever you can do no matter what platform you're on to enjoy this podcast and show others that you're digging it too. If you want to support this show financially, please consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/trekuntold. Shout out to Trek Long Island, who is having their 2nd annual convention this summer at Hop Hog, Long Island, New York, from May 31st to June 2nd. Headlined by Melissa Navia from Strange New Worlds, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, and J.G. Hertzler from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Star Trek Voyager, and Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks. Among many other modern and classic Trek shows, this 3-day event will feature autographs, panels, including some with yours truly, and other ways for you to hang out with the stars and meet your fellow fans. You can learn more about this event or buy tickets for it at treklongisland.com. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and beam in this week's guest. Computer, Access interview file. You've seen my next guest in everything from Murphy Brown to Mad Men and plenty of sci-fi, including The X-Files, Stargate, Battlestar Galactica, and, of course, because he's on this show, Star Trek. And that performer is Mr. Brian Markinson. Brian, how's it going today?
Hey, Matthew, thank you so much for having me.
I have to tell you, I've been seeing your face in Star Trek shows for the longest time, obviously, but going through your resume, I say this to a lot of folks, but I mean it when I say this. Like going through your resume and seeing all the things that you've done and all the things I didn't know you've done, it's amazing. So I'm really excited to dig into what you've done beyond just the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, it's a war of attrition, isn't it? I mean, I've been around for a long time, so yeah, I'm still here.
Well, it's awesome that you're here. And let's just jump on into things. And I want to start by asking you the question I ask all my guests first. And that's Brian, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Were you a fan of the series growing up?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself. Don't throw anything, folks. I would never consider myself a Trekkie per se, but I mean, like everybody else, I had uh, there were those episodes that I remember. I mean, uh, Triffids, right? I mean, the one from the original.
Yes.
Uh, I remember it, and it was in my consciousness as a kid growing up. But um, that's my first memory, and of course, the cool uniforms and Leonard Nimoy and those ears, and there had really been nothing like it for me. I mean, you're on a spaceship and on the bridge, and it was, yeah, it was. I do remember it, but it's not anything that that was a part of my life in a big way. But it was certainly part of the zeitgeist. You know.
Hmm. We're going to definitely come back to Star Trek, of course, in a little bit, but I first want to get the secret origin story for you, Brian. So, can you tell us where you grew up, who your parents were, and what they did, and what little Brian wanted to be when he grew up?
Oh, perfect. I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1961.
So, we are neighbors, separated by several decades.
Yeah, 480 years ago I was born. Yes, you're considerably younger than me. And my dad he was a chemical engineer and a salesman. He worked, he worked with his company, or the company that he worked for, one of them built hyperbaric test chambers. He worked with high altitude, test chambers for pilots. So, well, there you go. That's something. And my mother, was a housewife and also wrote PR, but she, growing up, had dreams of being an actor herself, and she went to school at the Herbert Berghoff School, HB Studios in New York City, um, so I was born in New York, but we didn't stay there for long. My folks moved following where my dad's jobs took us, New Jersey, Texas, if you can believe that. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. You know, a little known fact: Shawn Hayes from Will and Grace went to my high school. I grew up in Glen Ellen, Illinois, and so as a Midwestern guy, had on my when I spoke to a counselor when I was in, a senior in high school, and I wrote down what did I want to be, I said chemical engineer because that's what my dad was. I had really no sense of it. I started in high school to do plays and theater, and I kind of got hooked by that. And I had a theater teacher there that really made it fun, and it was sort of, it was kind of what some of the cool kids were doing. So I found a community in the theater department, but I couldn't imagine that there would be a future in this for me. So I was more practical. And then I went to school in a small school in Iowa, if you can believe that, in Pella, Iowa, where they make roll screen windows. Pella windows are made there, a little Dutch Reform school for a Jewish boy to go. I was like one of 1.5 Jews on campus. That was like me and some guy who was half, I don't know, something else. But I did 7 shows that year, 7 plays, and it really, really hooked me. And I thought, well, I can do this. And then I went to London, and I went to England, and I studied in England over there for about a year and a half, and did some theater over in England. And then on my way back through New York, coming home, I auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And should I keep going, or
Oh yeah, you
are
should keep
we
going. I was going to actually
okay?
ask if you can tell us, a little about who you worked with and what you learned during that time.
Yeah, well, so it was great. Ileana Douglas, who folks might know, was in my class there. An actor named Elias Giger, who's a wonderful actor. We had a really, really strong group. Louis Mastillo, folks who have continued to go on and work. It was the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. So I went and I stayed in New York, and I did a few years there and learned. Um, Ironically, I teach now as well as act, and I coach. And uh, met a teacher there who sort of instilled in me this thing that I teach now, which we can get to. Um, so I started and graduated school, did a lot of theater, and thought I was going to be a theater actor my whole life. I mean, that's what I thought I was going to do. I did regional theater, off Broadway theater, and then I was in Philadelphia doing a play at the Drama Guild there, and I got a phone call saying that Mike Nichols is casting the understudy, somebody to understudy Oliver Platt and David Hyde Pierce in this production, a Jules Pfeiffer production called Elliot Loves, which was going to be done at the Promenade Theater in New York. And so I got on a train and I went back to New York, and I spent 45 minutes in a room with Mike Nichols and Juliet Taylor, who cast all his stuff and Woody Allen stuff. And at the end of that audition, he said, "Why don't I know you?" And I said, "Well, you know me now." And he said, "You're never going to have to audition for me again." And I never did. Like, I did 6 films with him, whatever. And I ended up, understudying those 2 boys, and I went on and did a show for David Hyde Pierce, 2 polar opposite characters. So it was really cool. And so if you want to stop me, because I could just keep on telling you how I got to LA and whatever, but I thought I was going to be um, a theater actor,
Right.
and that's what I did. I had no thought or any kind of illusions, thinking that, oh my God, I could be an actor on television and film.
I'm kind of curious then, like at what point you'd made that pivot, like because I believe, according to IMDb at least, your first pro TV gig was China Beach, which would have been alongside maybe the likes of Bob Picardo or a friend of Trek Untold, Conchetta Tomei. So I'm wondering, like, was that like a gig that kind of made you change your thinking a little bit?
Well, so I did this play, and I had done a play in New York, incredible role by this wonderful writer named Joe Cacaci, who wrote a series called Max Bickford with Dreyfus, and he was a friend of mine. And I had done this play in New York, and he offered it to me. It was going to L.A. I had never stepped foot in L.A., and so I said, I can't. I'm in this show. Um, but Frank Rich hated our show. It was, I mean, listen to this cast that I was doing this play with. Anthony Heald, Christine Baranski. Like, it was this incredible thing,
Yeah.
directed by Mike Nichols. Um, they closed the show. I called up my friend, the writer, and I said, "Do you still want me to do this?" And he said, "Yes, I do." So I flew out to LA and did this play that all of a sudden garnered me a certain amount of attention. It was like me on stage for 3 hours playing this very intense, uh, Jewish attorney. And so producers, everybody saw the show, and it's like, hey, that guy can play an attorney or a cop or a doctor or whatever in my show. And that's how it happened. And so my very first gig was, do you remember a show called Equal Justice? It launched It launched a lot of folks. It launched Sarah Jessica Parker and Stanley Tucci, a whole bunch of folks. It was a legal show. That was my first. China Beach was my second.
Oh, okay.
And I had, I'd been in New York making, $1.50 a week doing theater. And I opened that first check of a guest star spot. And I called up my wife, who was still in New York, and I said, honey, we're moving west. And that was it. So they started casting me. And I had a beard, I looked a lot like you, little fuller beard, little less hair than you, but we were well represented in that, a New York Jewish guy. There were a lot of roles for me. So that's where I started. And then, like everything else, it's a series of small forward steps, and every once in a while you take a big one.
Mm.
We talk about that too. And then, ironically, 2 years after I landed, I went back and did my first Broadway gig, Lost in Yonkers, replacing, Kevin Spacey won the Tony for it, and I did the last 7.5 months of that play, a Neil Simon play. So go figure. Takes you. You want to get to Broadway, you got to go to LA first.
I just want to know what your frequent flyer miles are like, because this is wild.
Yeah, that was back in the day. Right now, I'm more of a homebody. I travel to work, but yeah, before I was going back and forth.
Well, I'm going to get a little out of order of your career a bit here, 'cause since we're talking theater stuff, really. And one of the things on your resume that stood out to me was that you did Angels in America, which is known as, a very, very important modern American play. And you got to do that for HBO, I believe it was, right? With Al Pacino and Patrick
Yeah.
Wilson. So, I mean, besides the fact that the play alone, it is considered, as I mentioned, one of the greatest American plays of all time, really modern plays as well. But, here you are doing it on HBO with some real luminaries of screen as well. So, just kind of talk me through working on that production and what it was like to take something that is really meant for the stage and suddenly be putting it behind a camera.
Well, I have a real. I mean, it's my favorite play of the 20th century. I think I was doing Lost in Yonkers on Broadway in '92 when Angels was playing, and so I saw the original production with Ron Liebman and Marcia Gay Harden, and on and on and on and on and on, and it gutted me. I mean, it was, I lived in New York in the '80s. I was there for crack and AIDS, so
Yeah.
I was there for all that stuff, and that piece of writing, it just gutted me. So that was the first time I saw it. I was like, I had never seen anything like it, and it just destroyed me, like it did a lot of people. And then, cut to me being in LA and working and working and working, and Mike Nichols would literally, like, I'd get a phone call from him at home, or I'd get a phone call from um, uh, 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 Juliet or Ellen Lewis, who cast for him, and they just say, Mike wants you to do the table reading for these, let's say, for whatever, primary colors or wolf or whatever those things are. And so I would show up and I would sit at the table and I'd read the script with everybody, and then Mike would take me aside and say, what part do you want to play? And I'd say, the one that Travolta's reading. And he was like, no, which part do you want to play? And then I would pick a part. So, but this was a little bit different. I got a phone call from uh, Ellen Lewis, and they said, Mike wants you to do Angels in America. And I fell out. And I said, yes, where, when, don't you want it? No, I don't care what role. And this role is usually played by the actress playing Harper, this part of Martin Heller, who is this, lackey, this Republican lackey from Washington. Um, he's usually played by a woman. But so this was like on a Thursday. And I was like, I can't believe it. I'm going to work with Pacino. I'm like, Friday, I get a phone call saying, Mike feels terrible, but he had promised this role to Wallace. Shawn, Wallace couldn't do it. Wallace, who I know and I've worked with before, who's a wonderful guy. And he said, Wallace was supposed to do it. He couldn't do it, but he's gotten permission to come and do it. And we're so sorry, Brian. And I was like, cut it, cut it. And then Saturday rolls around and they call me back again and they say, Wallace can't do it. It's yours. I'm like, are we good? Yeah, we're good. And so then they flew me in and flew me in for 2 weeks to shoot this one scene, a big scene, 15 minutes. We shot it in the Oak Room for the Oak Room. I mean, like, come on, no acting required. Patrick Wilson, Pacino, right here, and then during that 2 weeks I was there, Al likes to read. He's a theater guy. Love the man. Have always loved the man, and he rented a room, and we would just come in, and we'd read the scene, and he'd stop, and he'd say, "Ah, yeah, Ron Liebman, that lucky son of a bitch," because he would be like, "Hey, how much time did he get to get that into his belly? I got to." Arguably one of the finer performances that Al's ever given. I mean, it's beautiful. So and then we did it, and it was amazing. And I've got all kinds of stories. Like we'd do the scene, and Mike shot us like a two-headed monster. When we're on screen together, there's no close-ups. It's just the two of us against poor little Patrick, and we'd finish a take, and then Mike would say, "Good boys, let's move on," and I would say, "Brian wants another take." Like, "Oh no, wait a minute, Mike, no, I'm good, I'm good." He just loved to work, so it was amazing. And as much as I love the play, when it was originally done in a very small theater. It's a very intimate play. We think
Yes.
of angels flying in and doing that, but it's about two couples and who love each other, who can't be together, and why they can't be together. And so even that original production, I felt like it was so epic what Mike did and why it works so well on HBO. And folks, if you haven't seen it, see it. You can get it. You can get it now. And if you're in Canada, on Crave or Hulu, wherever you want to get it, um, Mike, the camera gets in close. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, you have the magic realism, but it's still like in those scenes where the Mormon couple, their marriage is falling apart. You can feel it. You're there. You can hear the fabric tear.
Mm.
It's remarkable, and that piece of writing is holds up anywhere. So that's I have a tendency to be verbose. So just shut me up when you have to.
Oh, not at all. No, not at all. This is all good stuff here. I'm always happy. When my guest is telling me this much stuff, I just shut up and listen. So this is great. And for folks who do want to see it, by the way, it is available on Max. So if you have never seen the stage play, go watch it on Max. Chances are you probably got that, or there's other ways to get it too. But yeah, it's out there and it's worth checking out.
It is Pacino, Meryl Streep, Emma Thompson, and on and on and on. It is
All-star cast, yeah.
all star. Yeah.
And you're making my life real easy today too. I should mention Brian because you already mentioned another name I wanted to talk about, which is Wallace Shawn. Because
Yeah.
I know you crossed paths a few times. I was going to actually ask you about your time with Woody Allen and Wallace Shawn on Curse of the Jade Scorpion. So maybe we can kind of maybe kill two birds with one stone here, perhaps. But I'd love to hear any stories you got more about Woody Allen. And also, since we're talking, let's talk Wallace Shawn because I love that dude.
I love that dude too. And we did Curse together, and then we did a series together called The L Word, and it was just so lovely to revisit. Like we would go out, the two of us, and you know have dinner together. Woody, not as social, but yeah, I mean, I've what kind of stories do you want to hear? Like I have how I met Woody Allen, how I mean that it's all good, but
I'm going to say stories that won't get you fired or blacklisted, and I'll leave it
no,
open-ended
no,
for you.
no, no, I would never. I adore Woody, and yeah, no, I mean, I got a phone call. If you want me to just talk out, because I did 3 movies with him. I did a movie with Shawn Penn, and he and um, called Sweet and Low Down, and then I did one called um, Small Time Crooks, and then Curse of the Jade Scorpion. So it was neat because I got to work with Woody just behind the camera, which he did, which was amazing. And then I got to work on camera with him, which was a fantastic thing.
And the
You
one
know.
thing I think I've heard about Woody from other folks, and I know we're gonna stay away from his personal life because that's a whole other thing that we'll
Oh yeah,
whatever.
no,
But
it's
as far as the
none of my
professional
business.
side of things, I've heard from folks who have been directed by Woody. They say he's great to work with because he's like, we started this time and we're out by this time because we're all gonna go get dinner somewhere. Is that true?
Well, yeah, I never had dinner with him because he was when he's behind the camera, he's behind the camera. But it's very very fast. He loves actors. He knows how to cast. Before every take, he would say, whatever you want to do, just say what you want. And like the Sean Penn and I would look at each other and go, "Do you want to change a word?" It's so incredibly good. And so we never changed anything. But his he's one of the funniest human beings alive. Like the way he gives direction is, um, he would say, "Matthew, that was great, but take the air out of it because the audience is composed largely of narcoleptics." And that would be like a piece of direction. You know what's wrong with that? Take everything. Let's do it again. So he just has great faith in actors. He loves them. He is one of the greatest writers that we've ever had in American cinema. And yeah, I mean, I had a gas with him. I had a gas with him. My story about meeting him is fairly epic, but it takes a little bit of time. So maybe another time I come back and tell that one.
All right, that'll be for the sequel.
Yeah, Wallace is. I mean, he's just a lovely, big-hearted, beautiful guy who is incredibly erudite, but doesn't hold that stuff. I mean, he wrote Aunt Dan and Lemon. I mean, it's like he's an incredible playwright. Uh, you know, his dad, John Marr. I mean, it's like, and he's so down to earth and just so lovable and everything. He's an anti-star, anti-actor. Pacino is as well. Those guys who really love it and do it for the art and would do it without a paycheck. It's very special to work with guys like that.
Attention all Starfleet personnel. New York's only fan-run Star Trek convention, Trek Long Island, is back this summer. Get ready for 3 days of sci-fi fun celebrating your favorite franchise in the Empire State. Meet the stars from Trek shows spanning different eras, including Melissa Navia and Yetide Padaki from Strange New Worlds, Gabrielle Ruiz from Lower Decks, Armin Shimmerman, Chase Masterson, J.G. Hertzler, and Kitty Swing from DS9, Ethan Phillips from Voyager, Janet Kidder, Tara Rosling, Conrad Coates, and Elias Giger from Discovery, and many more, including celebrities who haven't been at a Star Trek convention in years, like Clyde Kasatsu, Natalia Nogalich, and Daphne Ashbrook. Come meet your fellow fans. Take in a panel with your favorite podcasters. Enjoy Dinner with the Stars, featuring live musical performances. Meet authors, artists, and musicians, and so many more during this epic 3-day event brought to you by the talented and inclusive community that makes Star Trek go at warp speed. Trek Long Island takes place from May 31st to June 2nd at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Hauppauge, New York. Visit treklongisland.com for tickets, exclusive packages, and more information. Trek Long Island, going kindly this summer.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to know, as someone who was so heavily steeped in the theater world, to go from theater to in front of a camera lens, whether it's for a movie or a TV show, to have the kind of freedom that you get in TV to change your lines, like you were saying, Woody's like, do whatever you want to do it. For an actor like you who is kind of used to having the word is God, what's it like to have that freedom, and how often do you take advantage of that freedom when you're performing in front of a camera?
Not very often because so Woody is Woody, but for every Woody, there's the majority of them are, God bless, Aaron Sorkin, who is an amazing writer, and I've worked on his on scripts that he's done. Matthew Weiner, who created Mad Men. It is the word is God, and I get it. So it's never a problem for me. If you bump against something on the page, if something is not working for you, I would never just take the liberty of changing something. You go to the source, you go to the director, or they bring the writer in or whatever and say, this is, and sometimes they'll work with you and sometimes they'll say, make it work. because we are all in service to this thing.
Hmm.
You know, I don't see any difference between an actor and somebody who is behind the camera, or an electrician, or hanging lights. We are all parts of a whole, and our job together collectively is to problem solve. I never understood the us versus them. It's for me, it is a collective, and I'm there to serve. You know, theater is a much more actor um, actor, I won't say friendly, but based medium. Um, there is more freedom. You have a lot more rehearsal. The process in television and cinema is much more synthesized and compressed. It's like, hi, how are you? My name is Brian, and now we're going to get into bed and do a sex scene together. And it's like, there is no time. So you just throw stuff against the wall, and it gets, you serve the thing, and then in the editing room, who knows, you relinquish control. Do you know what I mean?
Well, kind of going down this thought process, since we mentioned that you are a coach today as well as a performer,
Yep.
for someone who, let's say, you're coaching and they're coming to you with like saying, like, hey, you mentioned a little bit earlier, this is really clunky. I'm having trouble dealing with this line. I'm having trouble understanding it, or I'm just having trouble memorizing it. How do you tackle a problem like that, and how do you find a solution with a performer?
Well, I mean, I teach a scene study class here in Vancouver. Uh, so nothing I do is dogmatic. I meet a performer where they are, right? And so some folks, and I don't want to get involved in your process. Your process as an actor is your process, right? You work the way you work. And so my job is to meet you and see, you know, so we're problem solving. I'm there to help them facilitate. Mainly what you're doing is, what is the story we're telling, even if it's in an audition, right, where you have 2 minutes to make an impression. What is that story that we're telling? Because, you know a, a director or producer doesn't know what they want really. They think they do until it shows up. And so I'm a big proponent in, you know we're like, my Hamlet is going to be different from your Hamlet, Matthew, and my Hamlet is going to be different from Meryl Streep's Hamlet, and on and on and on and on. So, how do we connect with a piece of text? And that's all I'm trying to get an actor to do, is like, how does it play if we're instruments? How does a piece of text play us? If that makes sense.
So I'm going to go from this really deep theatrical question to something a little bit more silly and sci-fi now, because of course that's how I roll. But
Yeah.
I do want to talk about your X-Files appearances, because you had two of them, and one of them was alongside Trek Untold alumni Day Young. You didn't perform with her, but she was in the episode with you in Born Again. But
Oh,
your
Born
first
Again.
gig, which was Folly Adieu, which I don't even know if I'm saying that right, because I'm terrible at speaking
No,
French.
Born Again was first.
Born Again was first. Okay, so Folly was
That
second.
that was
All
the
right.
first. That was the first season, yeah. And then
Okay.
Folie à Deux, which we could talk about, which is an incredibly fantastic, creepy little self-contained thing, which is
Oh
great.
yeah, that's what I want to dig into, in fact, because like that is such an intense episode, and you are so intense in that. And looking at your resume, I see a lot of roles that are kind of similar, and they kind of like say that this is, and I don't mean that in the bad way, but I mean that this is the kind of
Oh,
role where I can see Brian Markinson digging his teeth into it. And yeah, Folly is that kind of role, like perfect casting. I'd love to know how you got into that character, because it's a challenging character. It feels like he is so intense, you can get lost in him. So I'd love to hear about just working with that script, and also, of course, working alongside David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson.
well, yeah. So Born Again was, more of a standard sort of. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and it was the first season. Very, very different seeing them in the first season. By the
Yeah.
time I came back and got, oh, I've got all kinds of fun stuff. Um, and also, I just worked with his daughter, if you can believe that. You want
Oh,
to kind of
wow.
go historical? I just did a mini series, and David came to visit set, and we just went, "Oh my God!" It was very, very cool. But to see them, before Gillian Anderson and David, there was that, and then when I came back, it was like they were huge stars. I had a great time both times, but Folie à Deux, I mean, it's a it's a very universal story, you know, guys who hate their bosses. That's what, for me, that's all it was. It's like the guy thinks his boss is a monster, a literal monster. Um, how did I get into it? I mean, this is why I do this stuff, is because we as I tell my students, when you're 8 years old and you want to go play cops and robbers, you knock on the door and you pick up that stick that's in the yard, and that stick becomes your rifle, and you don't question it. And so I have always ascribed to that everything I do is just playing in a sandbox. Yes, I have played a lot of very bad guys, a lot of very intense guys. I've played guys who've killed a lot of people and have been, you know, done bad things to people of all ages. Let's say that. I've never done that. It's where does your imagination, where is it willing to go? And for me, I have no, I just believe. I believe everything I say. Here's a funny thing. So the very first time I see the bug, where I'm sitting there in the, I'm in the, the telemarketer. I mean, is there anything, can you imagine? Just all day on the phone. So the bug wasn't there. Like, I had no idea what I was playing to at first. So of course it's like that green screen stuff. It's you know, you just suspend your disbelief and go, "Oh my God," right? I mean, that's, they tell you that it's some creature, insecty thing, and it's terrifying. So I do those scenes, and then Duchovny comes up to me at one point, and arguably one of the funniest human beings I've ever had the pleasure of working with, like really, really welcoming and really funny, really smart guy. He came up to me and said, "Have you seen the bug?" And I went, "No, I haven't seen the bug." And he went, and he walked away because the bug, this is how great the special effects were on this show. The bug was this young woman in this mantis suit, and when she walked, she kind of like it was the least scary thing you've ever seen in your life. And so Kim Manners, may he rest in peace, the great Kim Manners, who directed that, he would sit behind the monitor because they put the bug, they'd have to turn around on the bug at a certain point, and it was just like this. It did not look good. Nothing. I mean, it just, you couldn't move it. It was a really cool getup, but like, it wasn't scary. It was like a person in a 6 foot bug costume. You look at that episode now, and and Kim would just be sitting behind the monitor going, "My career is over. And nobody's gonna. This is it. I'm done. I'm done." But then you see what they did to that bug in there, and it is really creepy. So hats off to the CGI guys. All of that stuff was amazing.
Now, I do have one other sort of oddity that I wanted to ask about here. I don't know
Oh,
what you got. We'll see what stories you got here. But I believe you worked on a WWE movie. Is that correct?
uh, I did. So there was an original one with John Cena called 12 Rounds, and then they did the sequel called 12 Rounds Reloaded. And this is
Obviously, it's what you do with those rounds. You got to reload them eventually, right?
gotta reload them. I know how that's very punny. Um, and it was with
That was it,
Randy
Randy Orton.
Randy Orton. So in a nutshell, here's a little behind the scenes thing. I was offered that part the night before because the actor who was originally cast did not pass their physical,
Hmm.
and they were put back on a plane and went back to Los Angeles. And I got a phone call at 6 o'clock that night offering me this part. And I was like, "Yeah, are you kidding me? The number two in this movie?" Producers called me after we closed the deal and said, "Great to have you. Here's the thing. Tomorrow we're doing all of your side of the phone call." It was like 13 pages of material. I had to learn all of that stuff. It was just me on camera doing all that stuff that one does. Um, I stayed up all night. The director's assistant would sit and drill me with the lines, and then we'd shoot. They were very, very, very cool. But yes, I did. And my son, who is he's 24 years old. Um, he's sort of a WWF fan now. Like his old man, who all of 5'7" of me, weighing about 155 pounds, while driving, kicked Randy Orton's ass with one hand. So come on. Yeah, that's my Randy Orton story. He was a good guy. I enjoyed it, but boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, this is what I mean by jumping in a sandbox and playing. It's a good way to make a living.
And just this is kind of the Trek Untold MO. We go from Angels in America to Randy Orton. That's how we roll here.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. It's such an insane way to make a living, isn't it?
It
Just
is.
like it's like, going into the Halloween shop, throwing this on and then inhabiting that for a while. Cool.
Hey everybody, we'll get right back to the interview in 1 second, but I wanted to remind you all to check out Trek Untold over at Patreon. Patreon is the best way to directly support creators of things you like through a monthly subscription of an amount that you can choose. Trek Untold has a few different tiers already with different benefits, ranging from early access to episodes, the ability to ask a future guest questions, exclusive merchandise, and other bonuses that I'd love to offer, but first I need to grow that Patreon community to do that. Trek Untold has been around since mid-2020 and has grown a ton since then, thanks to listeners and viewers like you. Through a platform like Patreon, you can help me keep improving the quality of each episode and keep bringing you new interviews with folks that make the Star Trek universe what it is. If this community can grow more over on Patreon, I can offer new perks like watch parties, exclusive Trek Untold episodes, being able to directly interact with guests, and other things, but in order to do that, I need to know my audience wants these things. The best way to tell me what you want is by supporting us on Patreon, so please check us out at patreon.com/TrekUntold today and become a bigger part of the Trek Untold family. And now, back to the interview. So Brian, let's beam into our Star Trek discussion now because, oh boy, do we got a lot to dig into with this here. So we're going to start with TNG Season 7. The episode is Homeworld. And you were Vorin, who was a Baralian. It's weird. One of the weird one-off aliens we've seen in Star Trek.
Yep.
It's an interesting episode. It's the first one with Worf's brother Nikolai, first time seeing Penny Johnson. So, kind of just to back it up for a second here, before you did Homeworld, had you ever auditioned for Star Trek before?
I don't think so. I think this was the very first time I auditioned for them. And what do I remember about it? I mean, they were on the Paramount lot and it was like old school. It was amazing to go on and work on that lot. But yeah, great. I mean, Paul Sorvino in that episode, which is just craziness, hey? Yeah, I mean, I had a great time and it was, the great Sir Patrick Stewart and the story, of wandering off, them saving this race and them trying to keep everything innocent, and this one guy who gets free, who sees the face of God in a weird way, and yeah, it's pretty profound stuff. And I also remember going in and sitting in the chair with the great Michael Westmore, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have the alien makeup, and you had the official Westmore treatment for yours.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just amazing, and that whole crew. But getting to meet him, and then you will look at the other stuff. But certainly, and it was, for me, it was not. It was just that little leafy thing on the bridge of my nose, and I think there's something in here. But and then the sort of those hoods. Yeah, but it was cool. Very, very, very welcoming, and I had never, I had never stepped into a world like that before, and it was very cool.
I'm just curious to know too, because your makeup wasn't like, not as big. It was nowhere near as big as like Michael Dorn's or anybody's like that. Yours was, like you said, a little bit smaller. So, typically the makeup artists, they take that stuff back. They lock it up in their Star Trek vault. Did you manage to walk out with a piece of your nose?
No, I hadn't. I mean, what an idiot. I should have, had I really thought about it, I would have taken everything. I would have been on the prowl. I mean, I had well, we'll talk about that later, but, just wearing the Starfleet stuff, I mean, it's amazing. And also the fact that you get to do a more of a heightened, in television, it's all about, you know, if it's good TV, it's all about deflating. It's not, we don't want to inflate ourselves. We want to come across as being, real people. And there's something, and especially a guy who was trained, I trained in Shakespeare and that, especially in the Voyager stuff, to act through that kind of prosthetic. You They weren't afraid of that stuff, and you see the actors that they've cast in those roles, and they are, a lot of them are classically trained, and they have voice, and they have, and I think that's, it's very cool, because I know that coming from the theater, when I look at my early stuff we were talking about, like China Beach and I can't look at it now, because I just look like, whoa, like I hadn't found that, that sort of sweet spot in terms of where you don't have to show anything. But Star Trek, God bless. I mean, they really allow for that kind of heightened, reality.
I like how you used the word profound a little bit ago talking about this episode because it really is a very heavy one. It starts off as one thing, you don't expect it to go where it goes, and by the end, it really is pretty rough. Honestly, it's a rough one to watch, and your
Yeah,
character especially is the reason why it is kind of rough to watch because he basically wanders into this thing and has to make a choice that he really has no choice in making. So when you're reading the script and you're approaching this character here, I mean, what do you do to make him your own? And what did you think of this story? Because it is for Star Trek. There's some pretty deep stuff going on here. It's really
he
atypical to normal sci-fi things.
takes his own life. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that
just,
doesn't happen often.
no, it's craziness. And so what they are able to do is take this sort of the macro, the bigger universal story, and then and or vice versa, and they distill it, or they distill the micro into this macro thing. But it's a very, very personal story. I mean, and we can all relate to it. Not having a home, or not being able to go back once the trauma of whatever that thing is, not being able to live uh, with the truth of a situation and making that choice. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, again, I'm one of those fortunate people who, I've never contemplated suicide or anything like that, but you know, our imagination can take us places, any place.
I mean, I normally don't do this sort of fantasy football acting, let's call it, but with a character like Vorin, it is such a unexpected thing that happens. Do you ever think about the character and or maybe perhaps if you thought about the character back then, did you ever wonder like, because he really was given no choice ultimately. There really was no right answer for him to do. Do you ever think about the character and just think, maybe there was a different way out for him? Maybe it didn't have to end that way.
Yeah, well, my feeling always is that the word is God, and everything that you need is on that page. And when you have a really rich piece of text, then you don't have to look too much further than that. So no, I don't go there. I'm one of those guys who everything, I was taught, everything you need is right there. It's on the page, and how do I serve this story that's being told? It is not a different universe. It is, I mean, that's a different story we'd be telling. So for me, it's always about just surrendering to, um, what the right. I mean, listen, I've never met an actor that I go, oh my God, I don't understand how to do that. Doesn't matter how, and I've seen and worked with the best. A writer, somebody who can fill a blank page. That's, for me, that's like, it's magic. And that kind of talent, um, is beyond me. I don't understand how it works. I don't know how people do it. And when you write something great and something that can affect other people, you know, So I'm in service to that.
Now, this is your first Star Trek appearance, but for everybody who
Yep.
you're working with, this is really their last season. So you're walking into the set first time. I'm curious if you can remember a feeling of the set or a feeling of the environment around the people with you, who are, they've done this now for years, and this is it for them. I mean,
They're a well-oiled machine. They're
mm,
all pros. The fish smells from the head, and and Sir Patrick and right on down, they were incredibly welcoming. They understood. When you're a pro, you understand it behooves you to be welcoming. You hear stories on some sets or whatever where don't look number one in the eye. They just that wasn't the case. There's a reason why they're around for 7 years, 8 years. These seasons, they go on and on and on. And so no, they were pros, and I think they appreciated what it was. I don't know. I didn't get a sense that people were like ready to hang it up or sad. They were just, you know, this is what we do. This is what we do. When we're here, we work. We have fun. We enjoy ourselves, but we're here to to do a job.
now, did you watch this episode when it first aired?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't watch a lot of my stuff. I do when practically speaking, if I'm going to use something for a demo reel or if I know, so I'm sure I did, and that was early enough in my sort of my television and film career that I wanted to sort of gauge, you know, what was I okay? Was I terrible? Sometimes you got to look at something 20 times before you can actually see it because it's all filtered through your own, you know, self-doubt and insecurity. But yeah, I believe I did, and I was impressed. They create a world on a sound stage in Hollywood, California, off Melrose. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy, and that journey does not end because we got some more Trek to keep going with here. So let's
Do it.
let's move right
Bring
on
it
ahead
on.
to Star Trek Voyager about a year later, and this time you are part of Starfleet, at least one part of Starfleet. Next time, maybe not so much, but yeah, you began season one as Lieutenant Peter Durst, I believe his name was, and first time we see him is in Cathexis. So I got to ask first, since this was season one of Voyager, did you audition specifically for any other roles?
No, 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 I didn't. I was on their radar by this time, and I believe I came in and read. I forget if I read for the Phage dude as well. I'm not sure how it was. I knew it was a two-parter.
So you did know in advance. Okay.
I did have a sense of what this was. I knew that yeah, I believe I did if I because it's a long time ago, but I do think I knew. Um, but yeah, but it was really, really cool to be in that uniform, uh, wandering around those sets. I mean, it was like pinch me, even though I wasn't. I mean, if I was like a full-on Trekkie, I don't know if I would have been able to handle it. I don't know what those folks do, the ones who like grew up like so, for me it was great fun and it was really cool. But yeah, and I do think I did know that they were establishing him there so he could be food for the going to the slaughterhouse in Faces, right?
Yes. And admittedly, I think the Cathexis is kind of a forgotten gem of season one. It's a pretty good episode. Yeah, having rewatched it again for the first time in a long time, I really enjoyed the story. I like the drama around it, some of the tension in that one. It's a pretty good one, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was sort of a more of a supernumerary for that. I
Mm.
think that I was not as much part of the A story there. They were introducing me so they could. It's like
Don't get
you
attached too long, folks.
don't get attached too long. It's like Galaxy Quest, right? I mean, it's that actor. A number of those are my friends who I'm working with, who I've been working with recently. Yeah, but it's that guy, and so it's that trope, right? Of the the guy who's, if you get to know somebody in one of those outfits, that eventually he's being sent up.
And that brings us to Faces, which I gotta tell you, Brian, like I have a love-hate relationship with Faces because I think it's a really strong episode, but oh my God, I can't watch it because Sulan. Oh my God, I can't look at that dude. And here I am, by the way, for the video version of this episode, I'm going to be having like screenshots of him side by side with you. I'm going to be so sick editing this thing. But yeah, can we talk about that makeup, please? Because that makeup, it's vile. How was it for you, number one, to just be in the chair getting all that stuff applied to you? And number two, reaction, first time you saw yourself in that makeup.
Sitting in the chair, first of all, it has to do with, they do a life cast of you, right? They do a full plaster cast, and that is hours in the chair with straws up your nose, because for that they had to do the full Monty with me. And then my life cast, which they used, which is really interesting, to use Durst's my human face to graft on to that. I've done it a few times, where I've had to sit and have that kind of prosthetic work done to me, and then you also had the contact, and then you had the teeth. Yeah, I mean, it is a chore. But that's what you're signing up for, right? I mean, you're signing up to show up at 4 o'clock in the morning and sitting in that chair, and but who gets there before you? Makeup artists. Who leaves after you? Makeup artists. So for me, I never complain about that stuff. It was cool. I mean, I'd never done it, and the challenge, of course, being, can I play love scenes through all of that prosthetic, because you have to over enunciate, and you have to sort of blast through the makeup in order, because if you're just doing what you and I are doing here, it doesn't, I think it doesn't really, I don't think it gets too far, and you can't hear yourself really. It feels like this for me. I had one eye that I couldn't see out of. It was really interesting, and then to see myself, yeah, you got to feel for those guys, huh? Living, moving through the universe, looking like that.
I mean, I just hate watching the Vidiian episodes because of the phage, because they really went to town on those effects. And I think there's a reason why we don't see them much after season one. I get a feeling the network might have been like, maybe cool it on the phage, but
Well, exactly. I mean, you've got, and also, yeah, I would imagine you don't want to give children nightmares, and
I'm an
those
adult and I'm getting nightmares from it.
exactly. Well, they're incredibly talented artists, right? And so, again, it's imagination taken to the nth degree. But yeah, you're right. It's gross.
I think the character of Sulan too, like he is, for lack of a better word, he is a real nut job. It's kind of like you take the Phantom of the Opera kind of character, but you remove the redeemable qualities from him. Even though he still does have the motivation where he thinks what he's doing is right, he's still doing it in just the most irredeemable kind of way. And I really, as much as again, I hate watching it because of that makeup, but I love what everybody does in that episode and your performance as well. There's a lot of different nuance to him for a character that is just kind of evil. So what was your take on this guy? Because he's a rough
Well,
character to portray.
well, he's in love. I mean, honestly, I like I say, I've played guys who I killed their own kids and abused their own kids in horrible ways. Yeah, I can't play that. But I can play a guy who is so in love that he's willing to do anything to please her. Um, Little side note: Roxanne Biggs, when she was Roxanne Biggs, um, who did that first. She was in the series, that my very first show, Equal Justice. She was one of the cast of that. Then Roxanne Biggs Dawson, and then of course she's a very, very fine director now, and was in her own right. So for me, I always approach the role from the human, because nothing happens outside the realm of humanity. Even in space on other planets, right? I don't believe in pure evil, uh, although there's some things that are going on in the world right now that may make us question that. But everything has to do with what do they want? And this guy is in love, wants to be noticed, wants to love her, wants her to love him. And if that's what you play, that's all you play. Now, the writing does everything else for you, and the extremity of it, but it's still it's just about a guy who's looking for a girl to love him. I mean, honestly, in a weird way, right?
That is pretty accurate. I mean, it really is, like I was saying before, kind of like Phantom of the Opera, a little bit of Beauty and the Beast combination going on there.
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly right. And whenever I look at any of those roles, it's like you can't look at the serial killer. You have to look at, if I can challenge an audience to empathize with that character, even for like that much, then I've done my job. Even if they go, "Oh God, I cared about him for like that much," then you've done your job, right?
And it's worth pointing out, too, that you are among the few actors in Star Trek history who have done dual roles. And that's often going to someone like Brent Spiner, on a few occasions, Jonathan Frakes, when he got to play now his brother, Thomas Riker, whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, in this episode, we got double dual roles because it's you playing a Starfleet lieutenant and
First,
also being Sulan. And you've also got Roxanne being but basically being two versions of Torres. So,
that's right.
yeah,
They split her human and her Klingon self, which is really cool, right? I mean,
yeah.
all that, all the duality and the dual, and also really interesting that like this guy goes and kills one of the Starfleet crew in order to because he thinks it'll make him look more beautiful for her. It's twisted, but still, it's still. I'm just a guy standing, just wanting to be loved.
Yeah.
I see it.
So I didn't realize that you had worked with Roxanne previously. So, I mean, I'd love to hear if you have any stories from this episode of Voyager, since again, she's doing a lot. This is a lot more than she would typically be doing, having to do basically, no makeup, tons more makeup. It probably was a little bit more strenuous for her than the typical episode in that first season. But do you have any stories about working with her on this very bizarre episode?
Well, she's just amazing. I mean, I'm just a huge fan of hers. But honestly, it was like I was sealed up hermetically in like there was not a lot of relating I was doing to anybody when I was on that set as that character because it's just craziness, right? I mean, it's like you can't see like if you popped like I popped the teeth out, but I was just like, you know, it was incredibly uncomfortable. They made it as comfortable as it could be, but it's still the bottom line is you are encased in in silicone. She was just great, and we were both in the same boat there, trying to connect with each other through this all of this massive stuff. Here's another little sidebar. Just it was Faces, right, where I'm in the jail cell, right, with
Yes.
so the guy, Rob LaBelle, who plays that character, his kid Gabe is the kid who played the lead in Spielberg's The Fabelmans.
Oh, wow.
That kid when he was that big, now he's on his way to being this big Hollywood star. Crazy, isn't that
It's kind of
amazing?
fun.
Another thing is that Robbie McNeil, who back then, so Robbie has become a very good friend of mine. Robbie is now one of the best directors out there in the business, showrunners, and we did a series together, Girlfriend's Guide to
Girlfriend's
Divorce.
Guide to Divorce. Yeah.
That's
We're
right.
we're on
Now
the same
he's
wavelength. That's where I was going next. So you got it.
yeah. So Robbie and I have like we ride motorbikes together and it's and it's amazing. And I've done him and Garrett's podcast a couple of times as well. And it's just crazy. You stay in this business long enough and you start seeing those same faces again. And it's great to be able to touch base with folks again.
I like how you used faces in a sentence unrelated to the episode too. Way to go.
Wow, look at us
I
go.
we are on fire today. Well,
Fireman.
that brings us, I think, to our last Trek appearance for you, at least for the time being. And that would be over at Deep Space Nine Season 5 episode In the Cards, which it's kind of a lighthearted episode compared to everything that was going on at that point in the show, at that point deep into Season 5. And you play Elias Giger, let's just say a nutty professor, a nutty scientist who is combating the soulless minions of orthodoxy, if you will. Uh, this is such a great role. Like, the episode is fun. It's a really much needed episode with everything that's going on in DS9 at this point, but I got to compliment you just because, again, this is a character who could just be so cookie cutter, but he's not a mustache twirling madman. He has a lot of nuance. There's a lot to him. Man, I love this character. My girlfriend loves him. When I mentioned that I was interviewing you, she flipped out for that role more than anybody else.
Oh, that's so sweet. Please send my best. Send my best to him. Yeah, I mean, it was fun. Like, you know, I was cutting up the whole time because just that robe alone, it was like I felt like Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. Like, I'm ready for my close up, Mr. DeMille. It's like,
This is a great parallel.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And and the egg, and he was just like Nutty Professor stuff, and the card. I mean, it was fun, and it was really special for me because Michael, who is such a beautiful guy, Michael Dorn, and it was his first. I feel really, really honored that he chose me to come in and play with him because it's his first episode that he ever directed, and it was a big deal for him. I know. So we just had fun. It was easy, light the whole time.
What's kind of fun about this character, I feel like, is that Geiger, you're playing him very much straight, but you still have Brian Markinson's comedic timing, and especially the scenes you do with Jeffrey Combs. That stuff is just really funny. Seeing like all the little things that you do, because again, you're also not in prosthetics this time, so we get to really see a lot more of your range.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
really have, I can feel like you're having a lot of fun here.
Oh yeah, we had fun. Jeffrey is one of the only other actors who's played dual. I know that he did that as well. Yeah, I mean, it was just easy and fun, and being in that weird laboratory and jumping in and out of it's ludicrous stuff, but it's also to the credit of the writers, right? I mean, it's like uh, always go back to that. If it's on the page, it's on the stage. If it ain't, then it's like doesn't matter how many stars or whatever you throw at it. What I call it is it's sort of like gilding a turd, right? It's like you can dip it in gold leaf and press semi-precious stones into it, but it's still, but a good script is a good script, and we were all blessed to have that.
You got to also be blessed with having, let's call it, the sampler platter over at Star Trek, because you got to spend some time on TNG, you got to spend some time on DS9, you got to spend some time on Voyager.
Yeah.
So, how would you describe the differences between your feeling of each of the different casts and just the kind of feeling that's on the sets themselves?
Well, as you said before, when I worked on Next Gen, um, it was towards the end, right? And they were a well-oiled machine, and on and on and on. When I came on to oh my God, it's so funny. When I came on to Voyager, they were new,
Hmm.
and Garrett, like Garrett, had no idea. He had no idea what he was in for because this was arguably one of the first things he'd ever done, and he was like, he would say to me, oh man, like I wonder if we're gonna get picked up, and I just like I'm like, dude, do you know where you are? Like you stepped in it. Like you got 7 years of this, man. Like they had no idea. Look, you had Kate Mulgrew, who was a pro, um, and Robbie, and you had who had done theater and had done a certain amount of stuff out there. But they also had folks who were new to it, and so it was new and exciting to them. And I forget what you would know what number those were. Was it 6 and 7 or 3? Well, I'm not sure where
Voyager,
we.
that was 13 and 14.
Oh, okay. So it was towards the end of that first. Well, no, they did 20. Did they do 26?
I
What
don't
did they
remember if it
do?
was actually a fall 26, but you were kind of like middle-ish end. Yeah, let's say middle.
Middle
Let's
of
say
the
smack dab in the middle,
But
more or
but
less.
they still didn't have a sense of what it was. I remember just a quick sort of side note, like the taking the being in the Starfleet and being on the deck and doing that whole thing.
The space acting.
Space acting, that was a thing, man. I remember it the first time. I was like, they had to talk us through it, because they don't tell you, like, it's nothing's moving, right?
Yep.
The cameras are moving. So how do you, so that talent. I mean, it took some time to get that going, but yeah. And then for me, it was all Dorn for me. You know, because in deep space, because it everybody was so happy to have him there helming this thing. And so it was just, and as you said, the lightness of the episode, it was just like a party, and everybody was there to support Michael. And so it was just great fun that way. So yeah, they all did have their but none of them were intimidating, because you know the producers, they're all pros. They understand that, like, this is, it's important to get this right, and everybody was there to do it. There was not a lot. I never witnessed any diva behavior on the set of any of those shows. It was just everybody was happy to be there, lucky to be there, um, whether it was in the last season or the first.
So among your Trek performances, which one of those characters was your favorite? Which one would you be happy to revisit again if you could?
Oh man, I like them all for all different reasons. I think, I- I like the phage thing just because it was such a challenge and I haven't watched these in a very long time. Um, I probably should have, and maybe we can revisit that. But what are you going to do? Because I can't speak to it, but I do. I remember the challenge, and trying to, um, you know, to climb that mountain and do that kind of, whatever that epic thing is in some of those moments when she leaves, and then all that stuff, that to fill that was, it was fun. It was fun. But I'd like to go back now, you know 30 years, after, I've done a lot of this stuff, and revisit that, because I think I would, um, any of those, I think I could improve. Just, because, as you said, like, in the midst of it, you don't sit around and go think how profound the story is. You're just in it, and you're dealing with it one day at a time. But yeah, in retrospect, I'd love to revisit any of those guys.
So Brian, that kind of brings us towards the end of this interview here today, but I got now the lightning round for you.
Oh boy, here we go.
Gonna throw a few tough ones your way? Here we go. So best day on the job and worst day on the job. Anything being stage or screen.
Best day on the job, spending 3 days with Al Pacino, sitting at a table in the Oak Room with him. I had to pinch myself. I've had a bunch of them, but that's a good one. Worst day on the job, standing under rain sticks all day and getting poured on the movie Volcano, or as I like to call it, Volcano. And what else?
How about now the role that you are most proud of? If there was one role that you want people to see Brian Markinson in that you would say, this is me, this is who I am, this is my best work, what would that be?
Oh boy. I did a movie, based on a real story, about four members of the RCMP who were killed by this guy, James Roscoe. I did it with Henry Czerny. It's a movie called Mayor Thorpe, and I'm very proud of that. Talking about trying to make a monster human. I thought I did a fairly good job. And then the other one was, NYPD Blue, working with the great David Milch, on episodes called Lost Israel.
How about something you know today that you wish you knew when you were younger?
I wish somebody would have told me that I didn't have to beat myself up back in the day, that it was okay not to be so hard on myself. As a teacher, that's what I try to get into my students' head is like, love what you do and, you know, be a kid.
How about the most valuable piece of advice that someone ever taught you, whether it's about your profession or just about life, that you still think about and you still use today?
Hmm. Well, I think it goes that in that same vein, it's like love thyself, right? I think we're too hard on ourselves. There's plenty of people out there who are going to be hard on you, and have faith in what you do, love what you do, and say yes as often as you possibly can.
And last thing for today, Brian, what's the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Well, I mean, everything is incredibly fleeting, and and to get my pun right there. Um, I think
You're allowed
I
that one.
okay, yeah, thanks. It's so iconic. It has lasted the test of time. I believe it will. I believe in the years to come, people will continue to go back to that. And yeah, I mean, it's great to be a small part of that lineage and that world.
Very awesome. And we should mention as we started this interview too, we talked about you and your coaching. Can you let people know how to contact you, whether it's actually locally or virtually, whatever, so they can take some classes with you?
Well, if you're in Vancouver, just go to railtownactors.com. It's a wonderful studio in Vancouver, BC. We teach on camera, we teach instrument work, and I teach scene study, and then I coach one-on-one as well. And you know, just reach me via social media. You can always reach out there, and yeah, I'm not too hard to find.
Well, thank you, Brian, so much for chatting with us today. I mean, really, we only touched like a fingernail's worth of the stuff that you've done on stage and screen. There's so much more, but I'm happy we got to dip into this stuff because I really do feel like the Star Trek stuff alone, it does show a lot of what you can do, but there's so much more to you, and you've done years of decades of amazing work. So thank you for all your time today, telling us these great stories. Hopefully, we can do it again sometime.
Matthew, you know where to find me as well. Thank you so much for having me, and yeah, take care. It was fun.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you for checking it out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Trek Untold, and subscribe wherever you are listening to or watching on. And that includes the audio versions on whatever platforms that might be, and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TrekUntold. If you'd like to support this show financially, please consider visiting patreon.com/TrekUntold to become a member of this show. And along with getting access to all sorts of wonderful perks, you'll also know that you're helping out this show continue to thrive, survive, and make new content all the time. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold. Thanks for watching. And until next time, always remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars, is powered by the Rageworks Podcast Network and affiliated with Nerd News Today.